the stuff, the stuff, the stuff, the stuff, the stuff, the stuff. The stuff, the stuff, the stuff, the stuff,
What stuff?
the stuff, the stuff.
Gotta have it.
Oh,
The stuff.
That's
The stuff.
Oh, that's going to the Alchemist mix. Yes.
Which, by the way, if you live on campus and you have dorm living and you have one of those green bins in your freezer, guess who you get to thank for that? That's right.
The edible churchyard.
The edible churchyard represented by DIT. So there was a time when those bins did not exist. People just had to deal without. Then the bins came, and they were regularly maintained by the edible churchyard. So now that we have the bins, you can take more agency and participate even more closely in the composting process here on campus by emptying those bins yourself. Or if the bin, like I use them if the bin isn't there and it's being cleaned, so I'll put my food recycling in the freezer and then just empty that out when the bins return.
Yeah, and it's been like kind of evolution, a process of how we compost in the community, because I think before the edible churchyard, before we did that particular part of the project of putting the bins in, it was like fend for yourself, or there wasn't consciousness about it.
Yeah.
And maybe some people knew to go to the farmers market of Columbia where they have bins where people bring their compost, and that's something too, like part of the city that you see is that people, even if they don't have, and people don't. By and large, 99.9% of the buildings don't have compost bins in them. That's what Grow NYC is trying to change.
Right.
So, but people know, people have compost consciousness. You know, they keep their scraps in a bag, and then they go to their nearest green market and they drop them off there. So that's what people, I think, were doing. We were encouraging people to do that.
Mm-hmm. I was doing that.
But then we had the bins, and then that was part of the process of like encouraging people to put scraps in the bins, and then we'd come around and then take them up to the tumbler on the roof. But what the new way of doing it with the Grow NYC bins helps us on one thing, because our compost tumbler on the roof is really full.
Yeah.
And
please don't put stuff in there.
Right.
Like
I think I've made it like physically impossible for people to put
Yes.
stuff in there.
Mm-hmm.
So, and that's something where the more you put in, it's its own ecosystem.
Right.
You know, it has its own like center of gravity, and it leaks sometimes, and it's kind of a little stinky. You know. And I think we're in the process of trying to figure out, okay, well, what can we do with this compost? Also in the process of figuring out how to share it, because I feel like that's, when we have the amount of compost that we do up there, it's like, okay, who else in our neighborhood needs this stuff, you know?
Wow.
And you know, giving it to people, not selling it. You know, we've been talking a lot about this in Dr. Call's biblical theology of food class, about the difference between like a money food economy and like the manna food economy.
Right.
No.
You know,
Reminds me of the Jesus miracle where instead of going out and buying food, they just replicated. They were blessed.
Yeah, and we just talked about that too, like the loaves and the fish.
The loaves and the fish. And so that removes taxes that would have been paid on those loaves of bread and those fish that would have been bought in the market. And it removes those taxes from the Roman Empire, and it puts that food into those people's mouths without having to participate in that system.
Yeah. So just having that's right. Theology is for people. But because we need to kind of look at that tumbler on the roof and say, okay, what can we do with this? And the idea I think is once stuff composts is to empty it out and then use it and then start to refill that again. But it's not necessarily an option how we were doing it last year in terms of taking all of our compost up there. So the Grow NYC bins come along at a good time, and now we can continue to compost, and we can actually expand it. And then it's something that doesn't necessarily stay in our community, but it's used for composting, and it connects to what we're doing on the roof too. People, I think, once you start actually participating in like compost consciousness, then that weird huge barrel thing on the roof kind of makes more sense. You understand what it means and what it can be done.
I feel like it would be a good thing to then just like spell out for people like for what reasons it's crucial to compost. Like maybe like here's why it's good, and then this is why you feel like it's crucial.
Yeah.
And then I think I have like a follow-up question, or like not like an antagonistic question, but I
Mhm.
think one that like would come up. So
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I don't know the exact number offhand, but if you look up how much food is wasted in the United States every year, it's obscene's not even the right word.
It's not. I can't think of it. Whenever I pass a restaurant, I think about how much food they throw away at the end of their day. And that's every day they're open. That's every restaurant. And that's everywhere.
Right. Even in a place, think about a place as enlightened as New York City, and people are still doing that. And I think that, the main implication that has for me is like the fact that, okay, kind of compare the quantities of food being wasted and the quantity of people who are going hungry every day in the city and elsewhere as well. I think, again, this is where compost is kind of a small thing and a big thing. It's a big thing in a sense that by composting and encouraging composting, it's kind of you're removing yourself from that wasteful process. And I think there's interesting implications about compost and kind of who uses it. And like after something is composted, who's getting to use it? Are communities that are quote unquote food desert, that's another problematic word.
I'll
I don't, or food insecure places are better ways to say it. Yeah. I'm learning to say food insecurity rather than food desert.
I appreciate that.
Food desert is kind of one of those like.
It comes
Go
with
ahead.
White person.
I was gonna say, it
Go
comes
ahead.
with this weird racial thing where it's like all the black and brown people living in the desert without the food.
Yeah.
It's
And
like,
we live in the Island Cabana Trader Joe's section of town.
yo,
Like,
oh my god, sorry.
no, don't apologize for that. That is true. All of the truth.
But like food insecure places is like,
Yeah,
okay,
okay.
well, that's something I think would be an interesting follow up for us to pursue with Grow NYC. Is like, okay, so we're giving you all of this stuff. Where's it going?
Yeah.
And that's something I think personally you're in a small way, kind of a small way. I don't mean small like in a
Insignificant.
yeah, but like,
Right.
but just kind of the scale of things. In a small way, when we compost, we're saying, no, I'm not going to participate in this wasteful food culture.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to make sure that my food and what I eat and what I cook with and what's left over and the leftovers, and that's another whole biblical thing. Is, they talk about things like Sabbath and Jubilee and the Sabbath year. It's like everyone's allowed to eat equally and freely, even the wild animals too.
Yeah.
So I think you take that step, you make that step and say, I'm not going to participate in this wasteful food culture, and then it comes to that bigger question. It's like, okay, well then when I'm putting things in the compost bin, and it turns into compost, who benefits from that? And I think that those are some interesting questions that we have to ask as a community doing this. And I think that there are some pretty powerful social justice implications and environmental justice implications as well. And that's one of the things I really want to make sure that we do with all the compost we have on our tumbler on the roof is I want to make sure that I want to find the communities around here, like in places, and we live, like Harlem and the Bronx are just these incredible food justice communities. Like there's so many incredible groups doing work, like
Corbin Hills. If you haven't, by the way, taken advantage of their, what is it? Co-op.
CSA.
The CSA, thank you. So CSA is Community Supported Agriculture, where you give money directly to the agriculturalist who then bring you the food that was used with the money that you gave them, and then you have deliciousness for weeks on end.
Right.
And recipes.
Yeah. And I feel like that, and one of the things actually that Corbin Hill is thinking about doing, so we're next to Riverside Church, and we would for the Riverside Church CSA that I work for, we've had this kind of idea that's been percolating about let's create an opportunity for our people in our CSAs, our shareholders as we call them, to actually bring their compost back to us. And then set up little compost bins at Riverside Church. And Riverside Church actually wants, Reverend Deborah Northern, beautiful, wonderful person at Riverside Church, wants to create community gardens. Wants to create a community garden space like we have up on the roof.
Yes.
Jewish Theological Seminary has their own garden space as well. So there's this kind of hope and dream that I think that we can create this little community garden network
Like
here.
a trifecta.
Right. And also stuff at Columbia as well.
Yeah.
But the thing is like, so if we participate in this compost consciousness and we're in communities where instead of, just really encouraging in communities that need it, especially for, especially for economic reasons, for wanting to create community garden spaces, it's like, okay, well, let's make sure that our compost is benefiting these communities.
Right.
And I think those are implications which personally I'm just beginning to think about. Like, how does that actually work? Where is our compost going? And how can we encourage that to go to people who really would need it, who might be maybe difficult for them to do composting or purchase. I mean, you don't want people to buy compost.
Yeah.
Because that's like an oxymoron,
Right.
So.
Yeah. That's true. I have visions of Homer Simpson composting his childhood farm. I've been watching too much of The Simpsons recently.
Oh, Homer composts?
Oh, yeah. That and in the Simpsons film, where he fills a silo, him and a pig, in a day. I'm going to get the clip. Yeah. But you had a follow-up question.
Okay. So I'm thinking about. So I'm gonna go back to my story, right? Like my grandma and like the coffee can, right? And so like I never thought about that. That was just life. Like that was the thing that we did.
Yeah.
And then I learned not to do it by virtue of moving somewhere else, right? So like a natural impulse and a cultural impulse was taken away, right? And so then when I moved to Union, I learned to compost again, right? Because I had not had that option. But I'm thinking about how sometimes something is natural and good, and then it becomes taken away, and then we have a resistance to it, because now we see it as belonging to someone else. And so actually I'm thinking about kale, like we talked about kale the other day. Like kale is a great vegetable, it's easy to grow, it's wonderful. But now that kale is trendy, sometimes it's hard to buy kale because I'm like,
I don't want to be one of these
for
people.
me.
Yeah,
Right.
sort of like a
Right.
hipster-ish kind of. I liked kale before it had, barbecue flavor in the stores.
Or it
Like,
became like hipster doofusized. I like this term hipster doofus. This is a Seinfeld reference.
oh really?
Kramer was called a hipster doofus by Elaine in one episode, and that's kind of my pejorative term for people who are hipster doofuses.
But like, how do you get around that? Because there's a certain stereotype of like, okay, this is the person that composts and they ride their bike everywhere.
Yeah,
and they have
True.
their bread,
And there's the ironic haircut that they have.
and what do you? How do you
the
get?
drinking PBR, isn't that like
I think we've combined hipster elements.
We
now,
have,
which,
actually.
like, the super hipster.
he lives in Brooklyn, in a band called the Adventurists.
So many ironic tees, unlike mine, which is just cool.
They don't show any emotion.
No. Even when they're shuffleboard.
Or playing their banjo.
Oh God.
I love all of you people, by the way. I'm constantly looking for you on OkCupid just to respond to my messages, and I will stop the incessant badgering. Okay. See, that's our next show. Is that's whole
That's
topic.
alright, because I might. Yeah.
So you were talking about the story of composting and things like kale, for example, becoming otherized and you having difficulty bringing them back into your own authentically.
Right, or just, like, let's say that we met on the street and you're like, hey, composting. And I, instead of being like, oh yeah, composting, I was like, composting. How do we think about having that conversation or rescuing things in general from being trendified?
Right, I think for me, what I want to, my steps of learning in that is meeting people and working with people like in the food justice community in Harlem and the Bronx who are doing composting.
Yeah.
And linking composting not just as this trendy thing, this trendy like Upper West Side white person thing, but like as this thing that's like this is environmental justice at work.
Right.
This is earth honoring. This is eco-theology at work. Because for me, like I call myself an eco-theologian, but I always qualify that by saying that for someone I think, everyone's concerned with the earth. The earth is not an abstraction at all. This is the least abstract thing. This is the planet that we live on. And therefore we have to get our hands dirty and be connected very physically to the earth. So I think part of the ways that we can understand composting and kind of deepen our understanding of it in a way that kind of rises above kind of trendy things is to understand. Well, first of all, I think is to like really work with it,
Right.
but then also understand the justice implications of it as well.
Yeah.
This is a way that people are uplifting their relation to the earth and their communities, and supporting themselves and supporting their communities by doing this, which again is like being part of the wheel of life. And I think the ways that we become being disconnected to the wheel of life is not just like an environmental concern. It has so many different kinds of implications to it.
Sure.
But I think really it's I think it's going into those communities and being with those people who have this real powerful message and movement, environmental justice, and seeing how composting is part of that. And I think that's in a way that really makes it real.
Yeah.
I think I just want to ask like the opposite version of the question, even though I think the response is generally the same. So what about like the super activist person who's like dreaming for Utopia Day where we all have free access to food anyway? Like, let's say that somebody already has like their big cause, but they want to support composting on some sort of level.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of involvement, or like how do you explain a new way of involvement to them?
You mean people who are like working,
Like on other justice issues, let's say, but they care, but they're not sure where
So
to
like,
start.
where's the intersectionality between
Yeah,
this?
and that is really like these are questions I'm asking all the time. In terms of even in our own community, and a lot of the work we're doing around Black Lives Matter and prisons and people uplifting people who are oppressed and marginalized in many ways, and all the work that we're doing around that. And I think that what I'm trying to learn is like this, making those connections between composting as an example of environmental justice work and eco-theology, and seeing how it's connected into all of our other justice movements. I don't know if I totally understand for myself the way to communicate that yet.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what I'm hoping for in our community is that we're trying to be a community that represents this very particular and very honest and very real integrity of life-giving, movement and theology in many different ways. And I think that just being able to the actual act of like composting your food is a big part of that. Because I feel like the challenge for all of us is to make the connections and make the intersections happen. And we talk about that a lot, And I think that is, in one sense, is like one of the hardest parts of our work here at Union, working together and being classmates and friends and colleagues. And I know that's the hardest part for me, is trying to communicate. But this may not be a huge big thing, but it is actually really connected to what we're all doing.
Yeah.
The Edible Churchyard is something I think that I really want it to be something that is a big part of this community. People think about Union. When they think about the Union and think about the Edible Churchyard, they come here because of that. And the whole idea of the Edible Churchyard is that if you're coming here to get a Master's of Divinity and you're learning all these different skills, that part of that skill set to become a person of the Lord is a minister of the Holy Spirit is, you're learning your Bible and you're learning your preaching and worship and you're learning your exegesis, but you also learn how to grow food and run a garden space and know about composting and and be able to bring that into your community. But then the skills, but then also understanding the theology behind it too. It's because maybe 10 or 15 years ago, climate change was not necessarily like this existential crisis that it is now. People maybe were not entirely convinced of it yet.
Maybe there weren't as many people for whom it was 10 or 15 years ago.
Yeah.
I think more people have jumped on the, oh my God, this is happening bandwagon.
Yeah. It's not going away anytime soon.
No.
So, I think it's just, to connect composting, I think is just like, and it's just like, it's something I think for me, maybe kind of like an answer to your question for someone who may be working on another particular kind of justice movement. It's like, well, just on a personal level, again, it's the whole point of like removing yourself from that wasteful culture and increasing your consciousness, because it's just, if you're increasing, compost is kind of this small but big thing that just increases your consciousness and awareness of what it means to live on this planet in a sustainable way. And that can have different connotations for people in their justice work as well. I just think it's like, it is this really a particular expression of environmental justice that can really connect in many different ways for different people.
Yeah, and what I hear in that is, if you have another passion, then when you do the work of building your passion around what composting is or what this eco-justice is, then that's part of the building process, as opposed to you as someone who's an advocate for it, finding all of the outlets and avenues and whatnot. But I found sort of like interfaith dialogue, that if you come in as, for example, myself, I'm a spiritually seeking but non-affiliated, Christian-oriented, whatever not. But if I go into a space and I'm like wanting to engage with other people of faith, and they're Baptist, but they're trying to dance around all of these other things that they think I might need or not need, or whatever the case, I would much rather than be Baptist 100%. And if there are things that I find fault with, then we can have conversations about that. And then they can remain Baptist, but they can grow in a way that is more affirming in their Baptist nature. And so with the ecological justice issues, with womanism, there's so many things that we come to this space fired up about and passionate about. And it's when we are true to those causes in community that we're able to start seeing the connections and building the bridges and being like, oh my gosh, there's this concept in womanism about wholeness that can be,
right.
I see the circle of life and being disconnected from things as an issue of not being whole. So I can see like the eco-womanist perspective, which there's a student that is doing her work right now in her thesis. I'm going to call her out because she's awesome. Amy. She is amazing.
Amy Vanessa
Rogers. She just did her thesis project on this concept of eco-womanism, and it's rooted in this exact practice of starting from this perspective of womanism, and then also incorporating within it these other needs and putting it in dialogue with eco-theology. So that's what I'm getting from it.
And I think it's like, the way I kind of understand it is that we've become alienated. Like this term alienation, which has like Marxist kinds of connotations, and those are cool too, and I'm learning about those.
There's always the Marxist thing.
We got that going on here. So. I had my communist phase back when I was in my undergrad. So the Rage Against the Machine phase.
Yes, still there a little bit. That's true. That is true.
But it's like you can say that we've become alienated from the earth. That's because we've become alienated from ourselves. And this is like full disclosure here. I'm a practicing Hindu. There's a concept in Hinduism called the false ego, or what's called, the Sanskrit term is ahamkar. And this false ego is kind of just, you see a lot in Eastern religions that talk about being an illusion, or that, and this is where we're kind of in illusion. We think that we're so attached to kind of these things, to kind of these bad qualities, or these, well, not bad qualities, but these undesirable qualities that we have, which are kind of like being greedy and being envious and being spiteful and being selfish. And unfortunately, we live in kind of an economic system that encourages this, So, and this is, it's like not this thing it's just like this especially intense historical phenomenon over the last couple hundred years, and we become alienated from ourselves. We don't really know who we are. We're not even, we struggle to just even be in touch with like our physical selves on a daily basis. And then our emotional selves, and especially our spiritual selves. We're alienated from that, and we're alienated from each other.
Right.
And then that creates all kinds of issues. That creates racism, that creates sexism, that creates all the ways that oppression happens in the world. And then, of course, naturally that extends out to being alienated from the earth. So, and I think that what we're all working on is how to transcend that alienation and become connected again, to our mutual humanity and our mutual living, and just the presence of life living on this planet. And that's something, for me, that's what I think is the common thread between everything that we're doing, even if we're doing different things. It's like you're saying, it's that, that we are, there's a common thread that we're pulling on here.
Exactly.
Yeah. I think I asked that question out of the sense that people think that they must do either all the things, or they must do one thing obsessively.
Yeah.
And so
I've been on that hamster wheel.
No, it's real. It's a thing.
Yeah, it's true. It's real.
And so it becomes hard sometimes to think about I should care about this thing, or you can gently add a new thing to your day.
Yes.
And
It
it doesn't have to be freak out,
hardcore. You're mulching in your pocket,
in your closet, with the cantaloupe ride,
and you volunteer on the weekends to help other people compost. I'm that person.
You're hauling a sack.
I have compost right now. But I've been this person who I come across something that's yes, I do need to be more mindful of, or I do need to incorporate such and so, and then suddenly I have this paralysis of analysis. This is a term that I just found, so I'm going to say that all the time, in which I'm trying to take and carry and hold all of this thing, whatever it is that's caught my passion, and then end up doing none of it, and none of it sticks. Whereas something like composting, which is, as you said, it's a small thing and it's a big thing. It's a small thing that you can do. Instead of throwing your food into the garbage, use the compost bin right next to it. It's a small shift, but it's connected to this larger conversation that I can be a part of. And that's what I feel now. When I use the compost bin, I know that I'm doing something that is impactful positively to the environment. And it's even more visceral than when I recycle. I feel like the tree's already been cut down, and I don't know how much of this mulch is really going to go into whatever, but when I'm removing waste, removing food waste from the waste system, and actually knowing that that food waste is going to be composted to then create new things to come into the system, I feel that connection, and I feel like I'm part of that cycle, that process, which is why the reduce, reuse, recycle thing, recycle is the last thing on there, as opposed to the first two. Mm-hmm. So reducing waste, part of composting is that act of reducing waste. And instead of food waste being waste, it's food recycling. It's food revival. It's a completely different process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we're just trying to, the whole thing with the bins, we're just trying to make it easy for us to do this. I think it's never been easier.
Oh my God, y'all don't know. I used to live in Hastings, and I would keep my food waste in the freezer, and then I would carry it, hoping it wouldn't unthaw before I made it to McGifford, then to the 7th floor, then up the flights of stairs, then in the freezing cold snow, and then I would try to open I can't. I'm going to stop right there.
Open the tumbler and know how to close it.
Oh my God. The memories. So now, lift and drop. You have several convenient locations to do so.
But like you're saying, it's it's always empowering. It's always just when you put that compost in the pit, it's just yes.
Woo! I am reversing the harm that my people have done in this space.
Right. That's the consciousness. It's I am not participating in the waste. I'm not adding anything to this obscene amount of waste, food waste.
Yeah, it's kind of like being vegan or vegetarian in the sense that you are not participating in the whole issue with meat and dairy and how that gets incorporated into food. I'm not saying that if you are not vegan or vegetarian, you're a horrible person, because I'm not vegan or vegetarian, but I do eat less meat. So for me, this is one of those instances where I was like, oh my God, this documentary on Netflix is changing my life. And so now I And so I try to pull all the way back and then some and sort of snap. So now I decide I don't buy meat from the grocery store. If I'm out, I might get it. But I've just made this subtle, gentle incorporation into my life in a way that makes sense, that has stuck. It's been sustainable. I drink almond milk instead of cow's milk. Like little things like that. And these decisions have become part of what I feel like I'm doing to reverse some of the harm and bring good into the life that I'm living.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'll have to start at some place, like for everything. This is just where I am this week, but like we all have to start somewhere for everything.
Yes.
And this obsessive pressure to somehow magically do everything in a revolutionary manner is like, I mean, really, like, it's beautiful, and I'm glad that we have these aspirations, but what happens is you do this thing where you freak out and you're like, because like, okay, so I did this thing with clothing for a while where I was like, I'm only buying clothes from the thrift store because I don't want to contribute to the capitalist system, right? And, I had all these clothes that didn't fit, I gave up and I bought some sneakers and then I felt bad, and it was rough. Yeah. But we do stuff like that, and then when we fall off the wagon, we don't trust ourselves anymore.
Yeah.
And then we freak out. We don't trust anybody else. We're like, nobody's really serious about this issue. And
they're doing it like, you don't know,
right? And then we shipwreck ourselves.
Yeah. The saboteur that we all have, like, is monumental in so many different areas of our life. And it reminds me of this story that I'm going to tell poorly. Heads up. Oh, but that rhymes. Ha! I'll take that. So there's a son and his father, and the father explains to his son that within each person there are two wolves. One of them is greed and evil and envy and all these terrible things, and the other one is goodness and kindness and mercy and all these awesome things. And within each of us, there's these two wolves constantly fighting each other. And the little boy asks, well, which wolf wins? The father says, the one you feed most. So don't feed your saboteur.
Yo,
right?
That's real.
Set yourself up for success. Right? Be gentle with yourself.
And with other people.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
You never know what people are carrying. Like,
yeah. Union.
Union.
PTS. Gail Hutchinson. City of New York.
But when Michelle Alexander was here, and before the chapel service, and she spoke in the hub, I know she said all these really wonderful, radical things about the system, right?
Yes.
But to me, the thing that was like, oh, that's real, was the moment where she talked about, I was gonna not marry my husband because we didn't agree on this one political thing, and I was just gonna shut him down and blah, blah. And then she was like, but then I was like, he's a person, and I'm a person, and we should stop doing that. Not just romantically, but in general. We should all stop doing that to each other. Where we freak out, and I'm like, you're wearing Adidas, and I just can't talk to you anymore. Yes, and
yes,
because it's the same thing, right? You're feeding the wrong wolf.
Yes,
Yeah.
Yes, indeed, that's truth.
I'm gonna take a moment for the feelings.
Yes. We're gonna take a moment to feed the good wolf.
Right.
You should join us, by the way. Feed your good wolf, right?
However that needs to happen.
However, deep breath,
stretch it out,
cleansing thoughts, ice cream as well. It's delicious. Well, Chris, you have been the best guest we've ever had on this show.
Amazing.
Hands down. I mean,
Thank you.
be a
Record
tough
breaking.
act to follow.
Yeah.
My goodness. I will say, I'll give you a moment to sort of provide some closing words, the obligatory call to action, right? But I will definitely say that you are going to be an inspiration to other people in this community. You already are, in general. But I think you're being an inspiration to other people to really find ways to connect with others in the work that they are doing. Because I feel like that's central to how you've oriented your passion. Like, your passion isn't, everybody needs to know about this thing because it's the most important thing ever. Yeah. And I've come across those people, and I try not to twitch when they're in the hall because I feel like I haven't done the rally that you sent me in my email or whatever the case. I love you all. Please send me all of the things. Just keep inviting me. I might come one day. But I think the important thing that I really want to celebrate is that just the orientation of your passion. It is a very quiet but powerful, strong thing. And I appreciate you for that.
Thank you.
Yes. So the floor is yours, my friend.
I guess just be on the lookout for these composting videos that some of us have been working on.
Ooh, speaking of
starting
which,
to trickle out, I think, fairly soon. We'll be working on them more. If you would like to help, basically the idea that we've been working on, some of us, is creating little, like no more than like a minute, like funny, informative little compost videos that would pop up on the UTS students' Facebook page or on these screens that have just like inert things on them, usually around campus.
True. They've had like the image from chapel from last year forever. The only reason I remember that is because I'm in the picture. And I'm like, I don't even wear that dress anymore.
I look at that one when I'm awkwardly waiting in line for hot water in the morning. I'm just like,
and it's just the same picture.
But imagine like the idea is like while you're awkwardly waiting in line for hot water in the morning, it's like all of a sudden like a compost video would come up and it'd be like this funny thing. Like one of the things we're going to do is like, what do you compost? And you put your apples and you put your eggshells, or you put like tea bags. Someone told me you can put your latex condoms in there too.
Hey, it's all good in the hood.
Or even putting paper plates.
Yes.
But what don't you compost? It's like, well, don't maybe throw your Bible in the compost bin. Although I had my green Bible, which is kind of starting to fall apart because it's just like it's a paperback.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking today, I should compost it. That'd actually be a funny video. It's like
you should
because
totally.
It actually is a compostable book.
I have a green Bible. It's so good to know.
Yeah. But then, like don't put your dog in the compost bin or don't put one of your professors in the compost bin either. So
or
funny
anything
stuff
you
like
put
that.
on the free table.
Yeah.
Just put it on the free table.
Right. So there'll be stuff like that coming out. And, if you want to help with that, let me know. That'd be great. I have a bachelor's degree in filmmaking. A lot of people don't know that.
Secret lives.
Secret lives before union. Oh my God.
People did stuff before they came here.
Are you kidding?
I know. I don't really
We're
remember. I
not
don't remember
all
a lot of it.
seminarian theologians.
Like, not know.
Oh my
We weren't
God.
like, it wasn't like creation ex nihilo here. We all just like popped up.
Tabula rosa.
That's actually what happens in the park.
That is. Like, as soon as you get the acceptance and actually turn in your stuff to Nichelle Jenkins, the process begins. And then by the time you come here, it's like your chrysalis comes off and you're just seminarian.
Yeah.
I find out people have kids, married and divorced.
Oh, can that be an episode?
Yes! Done. Y'all should still send us your comments for episodes because we just keep coming out. I mean, with and without you. We want to be with you, though. Also, surprise, I have a special treat for you all as well, a sneak peek at my compost video that I created. So that would be the bumper at the end of the show here. Thanks again, Chris.
Thank you.
Oh my gosh, you were so fantastic. Please let us know if you want to be on the show. This was awesome. I mean, I love eating ice cream, and I will eat ice cream for any reason.
Don't need an excuse.
I don't. I really don't. I should go and get more now. But if you'd like to be on the show, if you have something to share with the community, or if you just want to talk about some stuff, this is the place to do it.
Or if you like to dance, because I need somebody to twitch with. Because
we can have ourselves a little bit of a dance party.
Awkward.
Just
Kind of
like
awkward. Oh, that was gonna be the break, and then we could like sound.
Oh, that's totally the break. Nice. Okay. Good job, guys. But I want to encourage you, because the computer is so far away, to really take advantage of your like 10-inch voice.
Alright.
Yeah.
I'll use my projected voice today.
Awesome sauce. Yeah, and then just if you can, direct it or throw it toward. Because I gotta get a microphone just in general.
Yeah.
And I just don't want to.
Oh.
Really? Oh, it's still going!
How's your tail?
I'm gonna go with
tails.
Pass.
What did you say?
Tails.
Because you got it! Heads!
That's why I'm a doctor.